On the Dynasty Sports Podcast with Joey Blackmore and Cole Jirik. Special guest today on Father's Day. Not a father yet, but Joey Blackmore is a father. We got Mr. Grant Olson. How we doing, buddy?
I'm doing really well. How are you guys?
Can't complain. Joey, how's Father's Day treating you?
It's been a good day. Been a good day. We were at the pool a little bit, went out to eat. We were at the ocean yesterday, and it was good. It was cool.
That's awesome. Grant, how are things going with this weird summer for you? I know coaching's probably a little bit different right now, but how's the summer treating you?
No, summer's been great. You know, I know I tell everybody, just Amy and I have got to spend a lot more time together than we ever have before. So that part has just been an absolute blessing for us on a selfish note. But yeah, we've still been able to get a lot of work done. You know, we've got good leadership within the administration and the football program, obviously, that allow us as just a position coach to keep working and getting stuff done. And then same thing with the athletes. So I think things are going pretty well for NDSU so far.
How's your golf game going this summer? I know Amy obviously not playing the LPGA right now with it shut down, but are you getting any better? You break 100 yet, or where's the golf game sitting at?
I'm getting a lot better. I shot 91 yesterday, on Friday. And then I played decent today. It's like every round there's like two holes that just kind of throw everything else out of whack. But otherwise, I've been playing pretty much bogey golf, which I'm pretty proud of, for the fact that I used to be playing double bogey golf. So I've gotten a lot better. Still got a long way to go.
How much does Amy coach you at golf? Like a ton, or is it kind of like, hey, let's not go there?
You know, I actually asked for it. I think she's actually probably the one that's gotten more frustrated in the fact of like she doesn't think that she's a great teacher or explaining it very well. You know, like, and I went up to Mayville and I got a lesson with her old golf coach. That was her golf coach from the time maybe she was 10 until 23, 24 years old. And man, you can just tell, just a phenomenal teacher, just the way he explains things. And what I like about him is he coaches golf the way like any one of us would maybe coach football, and the way that we've been coached. So he gives you feedback every single rep, that's how I'm used to being coached, versus a lot of golf coaches is, hey, we're working on this, hit the ball 10 times, and I'm just going to leave you alone. Well, I'm not used to that. None of you are as football players. So anyway, that's one of the areas that like, I know I'm like, okay, if I want to get better, I need a coach. And I would tell that to anybody, you know, if you don't know the golf game, which I don't, I've never been taught it before, find a good coach and have that person explain it to you.
Right. Yeah. So the theme of these podcasts have kind of been like start in high school and then build up to kind of where you're at now. And obviously, you know, since we were just talking about Amy, you had a pretty remarkable career at NDSU. You know, you end up being an All-American and everything. But how does it honestly feel to be a Division I All-American football player, but to clearly be the lesser athlete in the marriage?
You know, that's really funny because a lot of people ask that. And, like, for me, it's not – like, I don't look at myself in any way as a failure not being able to equal her accomplishments. I really don't. And I don't know if anybody would. I would tell you, why would you? And, you know, her accomplishments have nothing – you know, that doesn't take anything away from me. So my attitude with her is nothing but being incredibly proud and just recognizing her greatness, just in all honesty. And, you know, setting the Division I career women's wins record at 20 in the entire country all time, like, that's tremendous. How could you not recognize that, admire that, celebrate that, you know? So anyway, I'm really proud of her, and shoot, I had nothing to do with it in terms of any of her accomplishments, but it sure is a heck of a lot of fun to watch and cheer on. I will tell you that much.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously Amy is, you know, spectacular in every sense of the word. And it's been awesome for all of us, you know, once you and her started, you know, dating, and to really just kind of like jump on the LPGA bandwagon and like, hey, I'm interested now, you know, and genuinely bought into what is going on. It's been really cool I think for all of our friend group and everything like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. No different than anybody else getting involved in something like that. It's fun to be a part of and cheer somebody on that you know and that you have a personal connection to.
Right. Yeah. So let's just, you know, before we really dive into it, let's just talk a little bit about Grant Olson, high school, Wayzata. You know, you end up, you know, you're at an extremely successful program. You know, you end up winning the state title your junior year.
Correct.
And then your senior year, you guys were good, but you didn't quite win it.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, your defense was remarkable the whole time. I mean, I think I read somewhere when I was, so it's funny, like when we do these podcasts, I always, I'll do a little research, which is often weird when I'm researching Grant or Colton or Kyle, like, like our really good friends. But I did. And I think I read somewhere that in like 2 years, it was like 78% of the time your defense had a 3-and-out in high school. Some crazy stat like that. And so from going that and in your high school, the biggest thing is, how was recruiting for you? And obviously as a coach now, kind of tie it in a little bit and like, did it help a lot being recruited at, at the FCS level? Are you recruiting similar to how you were recruited a little bit? And what kind of options did you all have?
Yeah, great question. So I definitely would tell anybody, like, recruiting has changed between the time that all of us were going through it and now. And a number one thing with that is just the date, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is with an early signing date, that has sped everything up. So it's definitely different. But for me, I remember, a couple teams were really interested and a couple teams really weren't. And I was definitely that guy that was on the hook, or several Big Ten teams were talking to me and saying, hey, we'd love you to come to camp. No different than they're talking to a lot of players that are very good, but maybe not no-brainer Big Ten scholarship players after their junior year of high school. And, hey, come to camp, and we want to see you compete, and we want to get a chance to evaluate you in person and see kind of, do we truly think you're good enough for a scholarship? And none of those schools ended up choosing to offer me, which is fine. Before that, I had North Dakota State and North Dakota were the two offers that I had. I know kind of during my junior year, fast forward into the summer, and Army has been talking to me a little bit. That was probably strong for me for the fact that my dad went there, even though he wasn't on the football team. Just the fact that he went there and being a legacy of some kind was definitely something I was considering. And then the University of Wyoming at that time. And I remember getting a Wyoming offer, I think in probably October of my senior year. But NDSU was the first. I'll still remember to the day Coach Bull called me up, and I'm telling you, like, I was home alone. I don't know if I had a day off of school or I just got back. Maybe I just worked out, but like, I'm sitting there on my porch in my boxers, and I get a phone call from Coach Bull and get a scholarship offer. And I remember it to the day. I know I did not have a shirt on, and I don't know what I was doing, but anyway, it's kind of one of those memories everybody seems to have that's kind of really random. But just in terms of the recruiting process, I think that for me, what stuck out the most, and I would tell any young person listening to this, is getting a feel for what are the core values of that program. I think to me it was very obvious at the time that both North Dakota and North Dakota State had core values that matched with the way that I was raised. So regardless of what you're going into, finding that as a young student athlete, I think is incredibly important, because you're going to have to go in and meet new people. Well, if that coaching staff is committed to a certain set of core values that you agree with, you are going to find a way to get along with your teammates. That's what I noticed on my official visit at NDSU. I knew about a lot of guys that were on the team. I had heard about them before, a lot of guys from this, obviously the state of Minnesota and then surrounding areas. And I remember being on my official visit and meeting a bunch of guys for the first time. And I'm like, wow, I like that dude. He's very much like me, even though he didn't go to Wayzata High School. He went to Northfield, or he went to Hopkins, or he went to Minnetonka, or he went to, you name the place, anywhere in Fargo South. It doesn't matter. But meeting guys like that and sitting thinking to myself, wow, I'm going to get along really well with these guys on this team. They want to win. They have the same values that I have. I'm going to fit in extremely well. So I think that's something that every young player, doesn't matter what sport you're in, when you're deciding what school you should go to as an athlete, try to meet some players on that team to get a feel for them. And then the other piece was the coaches. I remember Coach Vegan and Coach Bull heavily recruiting me and just being very looky in the eye. Being very honest, being very straightforward, and I just really respected that and appreciated that. So I've definitely taken a lot of that recruiting style myself into what I'm trying to do now for NDSU, and treating people with respect and being honest with them and telling them where they stand. And I think that resonates with people. I think that really resonates with people in the Midwest. So that would kind of be my main kind of how it got recruited. And I think where my decision ended up coming down to with NDSU is just having such a comfort level with the coaches and the players. And then honestly, I don't know a lot of people how many know this story, but I'll share it. After my official visit to NDSU and after the official visit to Wyoming, Coach Bull came to the school with Coach Vegan and Coach Hazelton. And he came in, he sat me down in a teacher conference room type of a deal. And I still remember this vividly to the day. And we're talking, and he just basically says, like, hey, Grant, I just want to let you know that our defense coordinator and our linebacker coach are no longer going to be with us. And you're one of the first ones to know this. And he points over to Coach Hazelton. He goes, and this guy is our defensive line coach, but he's a heck of a linebacker coach, and I'm going to interview him for the defense coordinator position. And I'm kind of sitting there like, wow, I hadn't talked to this guy once, and here's the guy that's probably going to be the new defense coordinator, probably going to be my new position coach. And I just went on a visit, and I don't even know if I spoke a word to him. But I remember leaving that meeting and calling my dad and saying, Dad, I am going to NDSU. Here's what happened. And just the fact that Coach Bull's willing to come in and look me in the eye and tell me that. And obviously that being something that it's like, he didn't have to share that. Like, he could have easily hoped I committed. And then I find out 2 weeks later that the linebacker coach and D coordinator are leaving. But the fact that he told me that while I still had a decision to make, I'm like, wow, I'll play for a guy of that level of integrity and respect. So for me there, it was kind of a no-brainer. Not that other coaches didn't have that, but it just meant something to me. It just struck a chord with me. So again, that's kind of how I hope to come across and dealing with anybody that I meet.
Right. And I think, having know you pretty well, I mean, honesty, integrity, respect, that's kind of, anyone that really knows you, this is literally who you are, like to the T. So when was that in your senior year, that time period, when he sat you down with Hayes and Vegan and you ended up committing, what time period was that?
That's a great question. So what it would have been, I think, probably the middle of the third week of December. So the first weekend of December, I go on my official visit to NDSU. Then I go to Wyoming, and I think this is maybe like a Tuesday or Wednesday. He comes in and happens. Now, I call my dad and said, Dad, I'm going to NDSU. The weird part about that was the next weekend, I still had an official visit to UND, and I had given them my word that I was not going to make a commitment before I went on that visit. And Coach Bull and all those coaches, and Coach Vegan, they all knew that. So it was a little bit weird because I'm sitting there, I'm like, I just felt so strongly that NDSU was the place for me after that. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I'm a man of my word, so I'm gonna keep my eyes open, and I'm gonna give UND a fair shot here and go on the visit. And then after the visit, then that's when I think maybe 2 or 3 days probably after that visit, I called every single one of those coaches. I called up Coach Bull and committed. And then I called up the other 2 coaches and let them know I was going to NDSU.
Right.
So right before Christmas, I would say, was when those phone calls all took place.
Yeah. Oh, did you come up in the summer before your freshman year?
I just ended up coming up for a week. It was kind of one of those things that you look back now and I probably wish that I would have. But that's the other thing that I think college football has just completely changed over the past even 5 years. All the programs that are bringing all their guys in, and I know the Power Fives have been doing it for longer than that, but the FCS level, NDSU having the resources to bring everybody in and pay for a summer class, it's definitely something that continues to set us apart. But I was able to come up for a week, which, was an eye-opening experience. I got my butt kicked, but I learned, and it humbled me. And not that I was by any means a perfect freshman, but it definitely made my freshman fall camp experience better and just my freshman season experience better, kind of having an idea of what to expect going into things.
Yeah.
Grant, your freshman year when you came in, first day of fall camp, how did those patterns go for you?
What's funny is, like, I remember they absolutely killed me, but at the same time, I also remember, Coach Bull came up to me after and just said, hey, that was, you did a nice job. And I'm sitting here thinking, Mike just got my butt kicked. And thankful that I went through it. And, like, the biggest thing that I learned in the summer was finishing through the line. Like, I learned that in one workout. I got my butt ripped, and that's okay. But, like, that was one thing that helped me quite a bit my freshman year, of not having to go through that initial experience that somebody else would have on the very first day. So, but man, it was absolutely tough. What a shock to your system. You show up, and the very first thing you do in that first morning is you do a conditioning test that you're probably not prepared for. And it's humbling, but
definitely not prepared for.
No way.
Right. Yeah. So since we're talking about your freshman season and being a year older than you, but still really young in the program, for me, at least in my experience of it all, I relate your path at a young age very similar to Colton's, where I remember you coming in right away and picking up the defense really pretty quickly, pretty easily. I mean, it probably wasn't easy to you, but to me, I remember being like, well, he already immediately knows more than I do. What was you end up playing in all four. You play as a true freshman. For people that don't know, you play in all 14 games. I think you end up starting a couple, maybe one or two. What was kind of the biggest takeaway from that year?
Man, that's a great question. I would tell you, I think that I probably learned in that moment just being a backup really for the vast majority of that. And I know I played a fair bit when injuries happen and things like that, but otherwise, just how difficult it is to be a backup. And people can say whatever they want about it's hard to be a starter or things like that, but I'll always believe that it's harder being a backup. And understanding the fact of the expectation especially at NDSU of being, you have to be as prepared as the starter, but you don't get as many reps, and then you also don't get to play in the game. It's difficult to do. It's easy to be the man, and I know at times it's hard. Like I know a guy like a Carson Wentz or even a Trey Lance now or a Brock Jensen back when we were playing gets a lot of attention, and that can be difficult to deal with at times. But at the same time, it's a heck of a lot more fun, and it makes everything a lot more worth it when you are the one that gets to go out and play on Saturday. So that would be something that I think I just learned about myself, and I think I also gained a greater appreciation for everybody on the team, experiencing, because most guys that go to NDSU, they were the man. They're probably their entire high school career, or at least their sophomore, junior, senior season. So they never have had to be the guy behind the guy, and it's not easy. And again, it was humbling, but I'm really thankful I went through that experience, because now it helps me to be able to relate to a guy that's maybe not the starter. It helps me to be able to relate to somebody who hasn't had some of those other experiences.
Right. And your role really, essentially your first two seasons was kind of that.
Yes.
You were primarily Preston's backup, correct? And
Yep.
I was thinking about this, before we had you on. Were you also like the backup Will too? Were you behind Chad? Yeah, you did both.
Yeah, I was kind of one of those where I know, depending on, early in my freshman year, I wasn't, but then Matt Anderson got hurt a little bit, and then Chad got hurt the one game, which is why I think I started the playoff game against Robert Morris. And then same thing kind of the sophomore year, kind of playing a little bit of both roles, and then kind of Travis and Carlton continue to get better. So then Brandon Jemison now coming and playing a little bit more Will, so I was able to focus a little bit more at probably the Mike spot. But no, it was definitely a backup role and a supplementary role for those other guys, definitely.
Yeah, but you were also a special team staple at that point too, which, and a lot of people, might look over special teams, but Tim Polisak probably did the best job of anyone ever of making special teams not only extremely competitive but extremely fun, and you really wanted to be on teams and play for Tim. And so what was, we talked to Hegel 2 weeks ago or whatever a little bit about that for your first season. We make the playoff run. We barely make it to the playoffs, and then we end up beating up Bobby Morris pretty good, and then we go on the road and upset Montana State, and then we go to Eastern Washington. What was and lose, a heartbreaker in overtime, and in the quarterfinals, they end up winning the Natty. What was your takeaway from that whole season? And in your opinion, in your eyes, your view, what was it like that whole off season leading into kind of the run that NDSU is still on?
Well, I think overall, the biggest takeaway from a team perspective was that we can do this thing. I think that was the biggest thing. And I know we lost, and I remember everybody feeling terrible. I remember I felt terrible, especially just because I had gained such a respect for the older guys on the team, and to see them as their last game, my heart broke for them. And it's easy when you're a young guy. It's always easy when you're a freshman, sophomore, and junior, because at the end of every season, you're sitting here like, yes, I've got one more. Well, the minute that senior year is up, and it's just different, as you both know. So, but I think at the end of that, just everybody looking at ourselves and saying, wow, we were the last team into the playoffs. We didn't play well a couple of these games. We easily could have won more games than we won. We easily could have won that game. They go on to win the national championship. Like, guys, we are good enough to win the national championship. We need to rededicate ourselves in the offseason. And if we do that, there's no doubt about it, we'll be good enough to win. And I think that was the biggest takeaway. But my experience as a freshman, I think now, again, probably no different than everybody else's. High school football, you're guaranteed 9 games in the state of Minnesota, because you're going to make the playoffs. And I don't remember what North Dakota is. Wisconsin, I know you're guaranteed 9, and then half the teams make the playoffs. So most people are used to at most 12, 12-ish games, maybe it's 13 if you win a state championship. Well, add 2 weeks onto that in terms of your fall camp as college is twice as long as it is in high school. And now you're playing in the playoffs, and now you've got bye weeks and all these things. So just the grind of the season, I think, is something that nobody was probably used to. I know nobody was used to it. Nobody exactly knew how to handle it. Coaches probably didn't. I know players weren't ready for it. And so I think that experience 100% allowed us to know what to expect going into the next season. And I think that continues to be an advantage at NDSU. I think that continues to be a confidence booster for every single player. I know I felt confident going into the second playoff run, having already made a playoff run, and I'm very confident I could say that about every single one of the guys on that 2011 football team.
Right. And then just talking about that 2011 team, first FCS national championship, we go 14-1, we drop one game, I believe it was to Youngstown.
Yes.
First national championship for North Dakota State since 1990. What did you feel like were the biggest differences outside of like kind of what you just spoke on, as far as, when we lost to Eastern Washington, at least from my perspective, I didn't think that they were good enough to win a national championship, let alone without their All-American running back, which we injured in that second half. And then they do win it. And then, like you said, it's kind of like, oh, wow, we can do this. But outside of that, what do you think the biggest difference was? And from your perspective specifically, because you did have a similar role.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think one, you can't miss on the fact that there were a boatload of talented freshmen that had redshirted that came in and now they were playing. You can't miss on that fact. I know we obviously missed some seniors. We missed some very talented football players, but just overall, between Joey and Cole's, your guys' recruiting class, and then my recruiting class, the guys that didn't play the previous year, all of a sudden there was just a boatload of sophomores and freshmen that were incredibly talented football players that all of a sudden NDSU was a much deeper team, a much more athletic team, explosive, physical, talented, you name it. It was just flat out better. So that you can't not mention that part, because at the end of the day, those are the guys going out and getting the job done. And we had a great senior class, and I'm not taking anything away from those guys, but just something that we were probably missing the year before. And then, I'll still go to my grave saying this, that I think that the character improvement of the football team, the camaraderie that was developed, guys genuinely caring about other people, growing in maturity, whatever you want to call it and how you want to determine it, every single person becoming more of a man and handling their business the way it's supposed to be done, in my opinion, hands down was the most important factor. And I'm not going to point to anybody other than myself in terms of, I knew I grew a lot as a person. I became a better teammate. I became a better friend. I became more mature. And I know I saw those things in other people as well. So our entire growth as a group, and it's funny because I still remember all the seniors that year going to Coach Bull in the locker room or at different times saying, Coach, we've never had a team this close. We've never had enough, this many guys that liked each other, that got along, that cared about each other as we've ever had before. And being a younger guy, you're kind of just like, well, this is just the way it was since I've been here. Well, hearing the perspective of the older guys on the team, that really, I think, spoke volumes to me of, okay, wow, it wasn't always like this. And maybe this is the reason that we're winning while they previously had talent, but they didn't have that team attitude that now is just permeates throughout the locker room.
Right. And that season, for you specifically, how did you manage to grow more as a player? Like I remember, obviously Colton had the big game against Georgia Southern, but I remember you also had a pretty big game. That to me, my first real memory of you standing out like truly on defense was that Georgia Southern game. And then obviously you end up being a captain the next 2 years prior without really having started. But what happened during that season to kind of give you that confidence, that leadership aspect of, hey, I haven't really been the starter, but I've been improving this, that, and the other thing. What was the biggest takeaway from those first 2 years?
Gotcha. Well, I think one, just a confidence and a belief. One of the things that I think Coach Hazelton did so well is that he rotated players and he developed guys and he got guys ready. Just for the fact of at different times being the backup, you might never have gotten to play ever in a game. And part of it was because of injuries, but the other part of it was that he trusted not only myself, but a lot of backups to be able to go in and get the job done. So all of a sudden now I had a tremendous amount of confidence. I knew I could do it because I had gotten the opportunity to show that I could. And I think not only myself, but a lot of guys had that belief in the ability in themselves because they got to play. So for me, going into my maybe junior year, maybe there's some people that would have said, I don't know if he's a very good player or not. What has he done? Well, through all the repetitions, obviously in spring ball and fall camp and all those things, I knew I had a lot of confidence, and I had confidence because my coaches had confidence in me, and they gave me opportunities and they helped develop me. In terms of individual progression as a player, I'll be the first to admit that I had a lot of things to work on. I had to become faster. I had to become leaner. I had to become stronger. I had to become a better man-to-man player. I had to become a better blitzer. All those things also had to take place. And I know, again, good coaches and a lot of hard work. I remember Coach Kleiman, older in my career, mentioned a point. He goes, you know what, Grant, like from when I first met you, you really have worked hard and become a better athlete. And he's like, and he goes, you're not the best, and that's okay, but you've worked hard and you've put a lot of work into yourself in the weight room, and you've improved on those areas. And that's one of the reasons you're able to make more plays than you previously would have. So just that one compliment from him meant an awful lot to me. And he said the same thing about a number of guys, but it's just someone that stuck with me as, wow, okay, so somebody else believes that I've gotten better. Well, good. That means the hard work is paying off. So just that, that one compliment I'll never forget.
At that point, your sophomore season, how well do you feel you really kind of knew the defense? Like, were you obviously proficient enough to be able to get out there and play, but, were you extremely confident in about everything at that point?
I would say that I was. I would say that I was for sure. Especially because, I know there'd be times instead of maybe feeling like mentally not knowing as much, having some conversations with both Preston and even Coach Hazelton, and saying, or at times, Preston might have come to the sideline and said, hey, did I do that right on this one? Or me being able to also go to him and say, hey, just double checking it. This is this, correct? So just being able to have those conversations. And then also, even there being a couple times where going to Coach Hayes and saying, Coach, I don't see it this way. This is the way that I see it. This is the way that I would see fitting that. And then him having that same, respect of, Grant, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that is correct and a good way to do it. So I would say that I don't know if I'd ever tell you 100%, but I would tell you darn close.
Right. What was that first national championship like?
Man, what a unique experience. I still think that one, I don't know if you'll ever have more fun or joy in that one just because it was the first. And I think kind of after that, they were kind of all expected. The second one was like, okay, we've been here, we've done this. And you had a lot of confidence going in. But the celebration was like, okay, yeah, we're celebrating just like we did last year. And then same thing with the third and the fourth and on down the line. So I think just the absolute joy, going from a non-national champion to now a national champion is a lot more joyous than going from somebody that's won 3 to 1-4. I really believe that. So I think, I'll never the hugs and the high fives and the jumping up and down that one was probably as wild. And it's probably one that none of us remember just for the fact that it happened so fast and you didn't even have time to think about it. After the fact, you've experienced those highs before, you probably remember them a little better. I don't think I can tell you a single thing about what happened on the stage or on the field for that first national championship. I really don't. But man, I remember it being, I think for me at least, the wildest of all.
Right. What since I've got two-time captains here, both in 2012 and 13. From a defensive standpoint, that's got to be pretty rare, I would imagine. Grant, and then I'd like to hear Cole as well, because, even though you guys were a year apart, Grant didn't redshirt, so you were both juniors at the time going into that 2012 season. For one, Grant, did you expect to be the captain? Did you kind of have a feeling that we were going to put our chips into you and the same to you, Cole? And then what did that mean to you from a confidence standpoint? And not only is it really your first year starting and going to see a significant playing time, but you just knowing that, hey, this team, like my peers, they voted me to be the leader of this ship.
Yeah. Number one, I think it was incredibly humbling. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. And I think that naturally, being at NDSU in the Mike position of this defense, you naturally have a leadership role. You're closing things and you're doing that. Like, there's no way about it. You are naturally you have to be a leader. But at the same time, I know I was also a junior, and NDSU so many times is so senior driven and so senior oriented and those things. I remember wondering, like, okay, I thought that I was a good leader and I thought I did a good job, especially on the field, but I wasn't sure if everybody else had that same confidence in me. And I think being voted a captain probably was a freeing feeling and experience. And I say that for the fact of now it's just a vote of confidence, you know, and instead of it's the guys that you respect and care about sitting here and saying, you know what, like, yeah, you are a good football player. You are a good leader. And we trust you and we got your back. And that I felt like allowed me to say, okay, I've definitely got every single one of your guys' back, and I'm going to continue to do every single thing I can that everybody else can be successful. Like I just view leadership as, you know, allowing other people to excel. And that's what I kind of view my role at NDSU is of, hey man, you got to make sure those 10 other dudes can fly around and make plays. And if you have to do something hard, so be it. But you get everybody lined up, you help them out, you get everybody on the same page. And when they go out and make a bunch of plays, you get to sit back and smile and enjoy the heck out of it. So that would probably be the how I felt. Just being voted as a true junior, having not started so far.
Yeah, I think I kind of felt the same way with things, Grant. You know, obviously, I thought you were a huge leader of this team, even though when you were in a backup role. You know, when those seniors left, we went on the spring ball, and it was time for new leadership to step up, and that senior class was very, very small, and a lot of those guys in the senior class, you know, weren't getting a ton of playing time. So it was like, hey, who's going to be the leaders of this defense? And there was a ton of guys that could easily have been elected captain at that point. We had a lot of really, really good players and really young players on that team, and you know, for me, I looked at it as Coulter Boyer was in my room from day one, and I looked up to him a ton. He was a very integral part of me, you know, buying into NDSU, becoming the player I did, maturing the way I did, and you know, I saw the way he led. And he wasn't always the most vocal person, but every single day he walked in and he found a way to get his job done every day. And you know, guys, you know, kind of gravitated to him because he put work in and he produced. And you know, I wanted to be, you know, kind of like that. I wanted to go out there and put work in at practice every day and help make this team better. And you know, for my teammates to kind of see that and vote me a captain was a pretty special feeling. I didn't expect it my junior year. I know me and you probably talked after that. We're like, hey, you know, we felt like we were leaders of this team, but now we are the leaders, and we have to go, you know, kind of take these reins and run with them. And it was a pretty freeing and pretty awesome feeling. It gave me a huge boost of confidence for sure.
Right. So Grant, you get voted captain. You know, your junior year was your best year, and a lot of that was due. And we'll get to your senior year with the knee injury and everything. But you know, you end up being a first team all conference player. You know, we go through that year, we end up 14-1 again. You know, our second FCS national championship. You got that crazy game against Wofford where it's like you versus that Eric Brennenstein or whatever his name was. Basically, was the whole game. Like, can Grant tackle their All-American fullback? You end up getting 30 tackles, 29, whatever it was. And what was the biggest difference? Obviously, you're starting now, so you're getting more reps and everything like that. But you know, you got the captain behind you, you got the confidence. You're a leader, like kind of how you just talked about. It's more of when you got voted, you felt like, okay, now I kind of do have a free reign to do all these things I was thinking and was kind of saying, but now like I need to say those things. Mm-hmm. What was that year like?
Well, one, I think just honestly, just being fresh, just to be completely honest with you, I think that is something that definitely I look back now and just realize, you know, part of the reason I probably got hurt when I got older was just the fact the body started wearing down a little bit. And going into the junior year, having not just played 800, 900 snaps the previous year, having more played a 300, 400-ish number, those 2 years probably each. Now all of a sudden fresh and being, again, confidence and just being able to really fly around. And I think that would be as much anything as just having fresh legs and being able to play at full speed, and then also being fortunate not to get injured as much as anything. The more you're out there, the more chances you have to make plays, and I think that probably allowed me to do so. And in terms of going out and just being productive, I think that just in the scheme, that's just natural with the way college football is set up. It's just the way that we play the game, especially at NDSU, of you're in a position to be a guy that's around the football a lot. When you're around the football, you better make some plays. But at the same time, I'll be the first to admit that when you play around a boatload of great players, it makes it easy to continue to make plays. You know, I do think, and I do firmly believe that a lot of individuals at NDSU don't get the recognition they should just because their teammates take statistics from them versus if they would have been a superstar on another team with not great players, they might have had more tackles or more sacks or something along those lines, but they wouldn't have played as good a defense. And the team is obviously nowhere near as good. So I'll again go to my grave sitting here telling you that there are a lot of other NDSU football players that were all American caliber players, no doubt about it, and they just never got the recognition because they didn't have the opportunity for the stats that other people on the team had.
Right.
Grant, with you always being a coach now, player then, how would you have liked to coach yourself in that situation? You know, the way you see the game, you know, it was fun to be able to be on the field with you in practice, the way you saw things on practice, the way you talked to coaches at practice. How would you handle a player like yourself going through it now?
That's a very good question. I'd like to think that I would enjoy it, especially just because just the confidence and the trust. And I'll be the first to tell anybody that, man, the utter confidence that I had going into every single game because I knew Jackson Hankey was our Mike linebacker this year, and that in the heat of the moment, he could look to the sideline and we could be hurting. And I could signal him, hey, next time this happens, check to this. Because Coach Braun just told me on the headset, I could signal that into him. And mid-series, he could get something adjusted if need be, just because he knew what was going to happen. He was able to do it. And then everybody else on the team also was again, smart enough to handle it. So, again, it's going to be hard for me to ever not coach a linebacker that's really smart now, having had a guy like a Jackson Hankey, and I would sure hope that coaches that I may have played for would have said the same thing. And shoot, when I enjoy having linebackers that I can have a conversation with and say, you know, and ask, how do you see this? You're the one that has to go out there and make the play. You tell me how it's going to get done. And when they feel convicted and they say, Coach, this is the best way to do it, great. It makes my job a ton easier. And I'm really, really thankful that we've got guys like an Aaron Mercadell and a Jackson Hankey, our starting Mike and our starting Will, that are outrageously smart that can do those things for us.
Do you think Brett Vegan's still upset with you for calling out almost every single offensive play during spring balls?
You know, that's a very good question. I'll still, I got accused of cheating a lot, and I still take that as nothing. That definitely never happened. Now, remembering, again, when you walk through plays, if you don't remember and don't learn from them, I'd say that's shame on you. And It happened both ways. I was just the one that just called it out loud. That was the only difference. I think everybody else knew what was happening.
Yeah, I need to get something cleared up right now. So that season was, and I could be wrong, but I think it's statistically the best year defensively we've ever had. I could be wrong.
So.
If you exclude the amount of touchdowns the offense gave up, I need to clear something up, Grant. Did you write offense has hustle and pursuit drill on the board? That caused a lot of drama.
That is a true statement. Yeah, something I wish I wouldn't have done. Looking now, could have been handled in a better way.
Oh,
that's awesome. So how was obviously, so you have Coach Hazelton for your first 2 years, and then he gets a job at USC, and then you get Coach Standard for the first time. What was that transition like?
Well, I think we probably knew, I'll never forget our first walkthroughs before spring practice and all those things when Coach Standard first got there, and him, I remember him grabbing myself and BJ and a couple of the older linebackers after practice, and he goes, "You guys have no idea how excited I am. You guys are the ones that are calling guys back. You guys are the ones that are coaching guys." He's like, "I haven't had that in years." Just the excitement and the appreciation that he had for NDSU's culture and the other linebackers, and not just myself, but all the linebackers, especially the older players. And I remember just I had a great relationship with Coach Hazelton and a lot of trust and a lot of mutual respect there, and then developed that very quickly with Coach Standard. And one thing that I really appreciated was that he was willing to humble himself and to come in and say, okay, you guys obviously won a national championship without me. I'm going to learn how things are done around here. And his humility, just the ability for us to, again, have a very good conversation about how do you see this? How do you see, okay, well, this is how I see it, and go back and forth was a tremendous blessing. And he made me a much better football player. He really did. He was a great coach, and I learned a lot from him, and a guy that to the day I consider a dear friend just because I knew he genuinely cared about me.
What was your favorite Coach Standard saying? He had plenty of good ones.
That's a very good question. I would say the most popular, I think, is definitely Antonio getting the B gap, just because you heard it so much. But
that was good.
I always used to really laugh when he used to talk about being as wrong as two left shoes. I don't know why, but I just found that one funny. That just tickled my funny bone. But Antonio getting in the B gap, man, if I heard that once, I heard it 1,000 times in 2 years. Easily.
We used to love it as DBs. You know, Coach Kleiman was the defensive coordinator at the time, and it was at least once every other day Coach Sander would walk into the DB meeting room, and Coach Kleiman would just be like, what's Grant Olson got? What does he need to know now? And it wasn't like Coach Sander had a question. It was Grant came up with something, and it stumped him, or he didn't quite know exactly how we'd handle it. He had to come to the DB room. But that goes back to him being humble enough to not just make something up, or, you know, like, hey, I'll go, you got a question, I don't quite know, I'm going to go figure it out.
Yes, absolutely. And shoot, I remember, you know, some of that stuff, and then just the willingness, and like, you know, it's probably something that I look back now, and maybe I could have done a better job of asking those questions when, but just in a desire to learn, a desire to grow, a desire to be the best that I could be, and also a desire to be able to make the checks and adjustments necessary, of being able to sit here and say, okay, coach, I watched this on film. If we call this and they do this motion, and maybe it hurt us last game, or maybe I saw it on film, but how would we adjust? We've never had that situation. What are we going to do? How are we as a unit going to, you know, overcome that? And to Coach Kleiman and Coach Stander, both their credit, man. I mean, shoot, they had a lot of great schemes, and then they empowered us to play fast, and they taught it to us very well. So obviously a great job by those guys at that time.
Right. Fast forward a little bit to your senior season, because I know I'm looking forward to just talking about coaching and everything. And, you know, that wasn't your best year statistically, but I believe that was the only year you were first team All-American. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was. And that's kind of one that, like, I remember I'll sit back here and, like, you laugh a little bit, because I think that there's a lot of awards that are handed out when maybe they're not deserved, or maybe they are deserved. You know, like, I'd look back on it and I would tell somebody, and, like, statistically, like, yeah, I did have a better junior year than a senior year. So if you gave me an award, it probably should have been then. But just like everything else, when you're maybe a no-name guy, or a guy that kind of comes out of nowhere, or the national media doesn't know about you, you don't get those awards. And I had that same, you know, I've had the same thing as a coach. And I've told a couple of players, like, I remember coaching a couple of guys in Indiana State that didn't receive some of the awards that I knew that they were worthy of. And I just told them, because it happened to me. I remember Coach Stander telling me, he's like, Grant, like, I think you're an All-American. I don't give a rat what any of these teams say. He's like, you're one heck of a linebacker, and I appreciate you, and I hope that means something to you. You know, and him being willing to say something like that, not just to me, but he said the same thing to Carlton and Travis. That means more to me than any All-American award ever would. And that's just someone, as a coach, that I know I've just tried to share with a couple guys, of like, you know, with Jonas Griffith at Indiana State when I was coaching. I'm like, Jonas, I don't care. I know you're not getting an All-American award this year, but I don't care what anybody says. Like, you're one heck of a linebacker, and anybody in the country would be lucky to have you. And I know that for a fact. You'd make any linebacker room in the entire country much better by being there. He's like, Coach, that means the world to me. So anyway, but yeah, no, unfortunately, I wish, you know, something that you look back now and just wish you obviously hadn't gotten hurt. But shoot, just to be able to receive that award one time was definitely a blessing.
Right. And, you know, that year is a roller coaster for you. I mean,
yeah.
We beat K-State, you get the game-winning pick.
Yep.
You know, we end up running through some teams, have a couple close battles, but we get to that Illinois State game, and you happen to tear your ACL. You elect not to get surgery, and basically hope that you can rehab and it'll be strong enough to come back and be able to play. You end up playing in the national championship game. You get a few tackles. Just talk a little bit about that. I mean, it was tough for me just to watch. I remember, I distinctly remember you coming out on senior night, and I'm pretty sure everybody in the Farwood home had tears in their eyes. I know I did, and I know all of us seniors did for sure. You know, it was something like I've never really seen before, and I would like to think we all rallied around you and like, well, we're not going to fall short. You know, if Grant's got a shot to come back, we're going to make sure he's got a shot.
Yeah. You know, just the emotion of walk. You know, you just talk about walking out on senior day, and that's kind of something I think everybody just kind of assumes. You know, for 3 years leading up to it, you're dressed and you're ready to go, and you just kind of assume the same thing's going to happen to you on senior day. And not being able to play, not just that, but just also kind of the reality of like, man, it's over. it's over shorter than what I thought. I thought I was going to get another 6 football games, and no, it was really done after 9. And I just being able to play a couple plays was great and everything, but still, it just wasn't the same. And nor is it ever going to be for anybody with that sort of an injury. But man, that's someone that, like, I'll never forget is that entire senior class and that entire team. Like, I would tell somebody the reason I was willing to give everything I had for them, like the reason I was willing to come back and play on a torn ACL, is I know that every single one of those guys would have done it, everything possible for me. And not only that, but I saw them do it. I saw you, I saw Cole, I saw every single one of our teammates, give it their all off season and for over 3 years. And for me, it was like, well, like, man, if I can play one play, if I can come in and just even be productive, and even if it's at the end of the game and I just get one garbage play, shoot, if there's anything I can do to help this team, well, I'm going to do it. And not only that, but I want to do it, and I know they do it for me. And I wasn't the only guy playing on an injury that year. Cole was. We had so many D linemen with bad knees, bad backs. We had so many guys. So sometimes I know I also sit here, shoot, Jeremy Gordon was playing on a torn ACL. Nobody ever remembers him. And that's one of the things I know I tell a lot of people. I'm like, listen, like, I might be the one that's a little bit more famous for it, just for whatever reason, just because I was a captain and it was a torn ACL. But, like, don't think for a minute that other guys in the team weren't fighting through just as difficult injuries and weren't giving it their all. So that's kind of one thing that sometimes a lot of people, again, like, I don't want to say I get mad about, but I always want to remember to point out to everybody else that I'm like, I wasn't the only one going through that stuff. But yeah, what a team, what an incredible group. Shoot, it's funny. I don't know about you guys, but there's times I look back now and I think, man, what if I wouldn't have chosen to go to NDSU? Would I have the friends that I have today? Would I have the opportunities I have today? I often think, no, I probably wouldn't. And I consider myself the luckiest guy in the world to have been able to play on NDSU, to have played with both of you two, plus everybody else on that team. And then now to get a coach here, I'm sitting here like, man, it's hard to consider yourself more lucky than I consider myself.
Right. And then let's just segue right into coaching. So after your senior season, obviously you were a 4-year guy. You end up being a student assistant in that 2014 season with brand new coaching staff. We didn't touch on it at all, but Coach Boley takes a Wyoming job in the middle of the playoff run, ends up leaving, and it's Coach Kleiman, Coach Gazer, and Coach Riley. And yes, that's all that's left. Everyone else is new. And you get to learn and help teach, I would imagine, a little bit, Coach Entz, who's now obviously the head coach. What was that 2014 season like, officially not being a player anymore, even though you were always kind of like a coach the whole time?
Great. Oh, shoot, great question. One of the big, I think, takeaways for me was just the humility that all the new coaches had coming in. I think that I look at it from a player's perspective still somewhat, and I think the fact that obviously number one, Coach Kramer stuck around, and then the next piece of that was that the offense maintained the same and the defense stayed the same. I firmly believe that those 3 factors, and starting with Coach Kramer being a number one factor, is why that NDSU continued to be really successful. But I'll just never forget, Coach Entz saying, hey, what do you have going on tonight? Like, nothing, I'm free. Like, okay, well, stay after and let's just talk some football. Just teach me from your perspective what it is. Because I can read the playbook. Like, I don't want the playbook. I want how you think of it as a player. Help me to relate it to these guys. And his humility, and that is something that I'm like, man, if I hope to be as humble as Coach Entz. I really, that's a goal of mine. And I don't know if I've ever achieved it, but it just meant a lot to me. And I'm like, wow, okay. His humility gave me a boatload of confidence going into the next season. I'm like, if he's willing to be humble, I promise you we're going to be really stinking good. But yeah, we would spend a couple hours most every night just going over and over again, just the basics of NDSU linebacker play, alignments, fits, eyes, all those fundamentals. And it's no doubt the reason that the linebackers continue to be really good. You look at Esley Thornton having a great senior year. Well, he got a great coach his senior year. He had already been developed, but he was now able to come out and make a boatload of plays. Obviously you look at Nick DeLuca coming on at the end of that year, having a fantastic year. So, kudos to Coach Entz for doing a great job then.
Right. And then after that season, we win our 4th national championship in a row. You decide to take the great opportunity to go be a graduate assistant at Wyoming, for Coach Bull, which I would imagine was pretty comfortable for you at the very least, being familiar with everybody. What were those 2 years like? It was that's got to be the first time in your life where you struggled as a team, I would imagine. I mean, the defenses weren't very good. The seasons weren't great. You know, how was that how was your growth as a coach? And then how did you handle that?
No, great question. You know, number one, yeah, it was hard. Like that first year we went 2-10, and that was more losses than I had in my entire career at NDSU. Plus, I think the previous, if I just look back, I'd have to do the math on it, but maybe even since sophomore year of high school in terms of varsity football. I mean, it was just, and that goes to show you how much success we had at NDSU. But man, it was very humbling. You know, you go from winning 4 national championships to going 2-10, and at times, you know, you're getting beat by 40, 50 points, and it's very humbling. And I think when I found out about that was looking at myself saying like, okay, it's easy to be on top. Like, don't listen to what anybody tells you. It's very easy. Like, I say that meaning, it obviously takes a lot of hard work to be at NDSU and have the success. But at the same time, when you're winning, it's very easy to be a good teammate. It's very easy to find a little bit of extra motivation. It's very difficult when you're 2-10. And you got a bunch of guys on the team that don't believe and aren't doing the little things right. It's very hard to say, yeah, we should be doing the little things right. Well, why, coach? You told us to do that and we went 2-10. Why should I listen to you? What do you know? So that I think was just incredibly humbling. It was also very revealing. I think that you really saw people's true colors show up. Again, like anybody in the world can be a great coach and a super friendly, easy guy to get along with when you're 15-0 or 14-1. Everybody in the world's a nice guy when you're 15-0. Well, all of a sudden now you go to 2-10, and all of a sudden you really see, okay, well, wait a minute here. Like, what do I have to do? And I think I had a lot of internal, I had to look at myself and saying, okay, am I, you know, a good enough coach, or how can I be better? So it caused me to really self-evaluate and look again at why am I coaching? You know, what are my expectations? And am I treating people worse? Like, am I treating somebody worse if we're 2-10 versus being 10-2? Well, I sure hope not. But it made me look at myself and ask that question, which was very beneficial. It made me go to a different area of the country, play different teams, learn new schemes. And it was one of those where no different than any place. You learn good things to do and you learn bad things to do. But again, yeah, it was a great experience for a young coach, and it couldn't have been better for me to get away from NDSU and to experience what it's like at a different program and in a different state that hasn't had the success and the history.
Right. And just segueing that right into your first full-time job, you end up at Indiana State. I think he was the safeties coach at Wyoming, correct?
Yeah.
And
correct.
then he gets the head coaching job at Indiana State. He hires you as the linebackers coach, and extremely similar to what you just talked about. I don't think – did you guys go 0-11?
Correct.
Oh, don't win a game that first year. But all of those things that you just said, how difficult it is to do this, and you end up completely turning it around year 2. You end up going 7-4, I believe, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I knew you I mean, should have made the play. Did you guys make the playoffs?
We did not.
Absolutely snubbed.
I personally think that was a bad decision. I think we no doubt should have made the playoffs, but not my call.
So everything you learned at Wyoming, everything you learned in that first year at Indiana State, how did you guys as a coaching staff put it all together to win 7 games in the Missouri Valley?
That's a great question. You know, I think that the confidence was probably number one, the biggest thing, because you go 0-11, and I think every single person, every coach and every player starts doubting themselves when you don't win a single game, and you're asking them to put all the hard work in. And I'll still tell you to this day that the biggest party in the locker room I've ever experienced was our first win the second year at Indiana State. When you don't win a game for over like 2 entire calendar years, not just a calendar football season, but literally 700 some days, I mean, we partied. You seriously might have thought we won the Super Bowl. Guys were jumping up and down and hugging and high-fiving. It was incredible. Like, that was probably, honestly, as much fun of a win or as much fun of a celebration as I've ever had, just because of going, again, from 0-11 to finally being able to win a game and break through was incredible. But it was the exact same way that NDSU went from 3-8 to 9-5 in the national championship. Same thing that happened at Wyoming. They went from 2-10 to 8-4 in the regular season. I know we lost the conference championship in the bowl game, but still a tremendous regular season. And then at Indiana State, to go from 0-11 to 7-4, of getting that buy-in. But every place I just saw the confidence of, wow, that one light bulb moment where you got a guy that maybe wasn't fully bought in, and you win a close game, and then now all of a sudden they genuinely believe that you can win any game that you're in. Man, what a what a fun experience as a coach. What a fun thing to be a part of. And you'll just never convince me that there's not the best way to do it. And doing all the little things right, paying attention to the details, putting in all the hard work, all that stuff comes before the win, and it works. That's the other thing. I'll sit here and tell anybody, guys, it does work. If you're willing to do it, it works. So keep at it, and the results will come. But yeah, shoot, couldn't have been more thankful to be a part of that experience. I mean, a lot of fun, and we had our trials too. I think we started off, 2-4. And we're kind of like, Jesus, this is going to be another 2-9 season. And all of a sudden we got one win. We were losing close games, and then we found a way to start winning close games. And then you win a few more close games. Then all of a sudden you start beating teams big. No different than what happened to NDSU in that first in 2010 playoff run, where you're fine, you're back and forth. And then all of a sudden you just get some confidence, and then you start blowing the doors off some people.
Yeah. And obviously the success that you had there didn't go unnoticed. I mean, you end up getting hired as, the linebackers coach at, North Dakota State, which is where you're currently at. And that was just last season. Was your first year there. And you're finally back at NDSU, and you decide to win 16 in a row and do what no one's done in college football at any level since like 1890.
Yep.
What was that ride like last year?
Man, oh shoot, good question. Well, I still look back, and for me, it obviously all started with just in the off season of coming in, and for me, not really entirely knowing what to expect, having a lot of confidence though at the same time of saying like, okay, I do know how NDSU is going to do things, but there's a lot of coaches that I still didn't know. I knew Coach Gazer, but I didn't know any of the other coaches really know him on defense. And I knew Coach Roll, and I knew Coach Hedberg a little bit. Obviously, I knew Coach Ed's pretty darn well. But again, I didn't know very many of the offensive coaches. So for me, it was definitely a going in, like, I don't know how I'm going to get along with these guys. And I couldn't be more thankful to Coach Entz that he hired, most importantly, just some phenomenal character people that I just genuinely really enjoy working with. I go into work every single day and enjoy it because of all the phenomenal people I get to work with. So that right there in the off season, I'm like, okay, man, one, I learned that these are good men. They love their wives. They care about their kids. They work hard. They're smart. I'm sitting here like, I don't know if we're talented enough to win. I haven't been back in NDSU in a while, but I'm like, I do know that we as coaches are not going to mess this thing up. We're going to work hard, and we're going to put these players in a position to be successful, and then give the players credit for going out and getting the job done. So phenomenal experience. Really loved working with the coaches every single day, spending all the time with them. And then also being fortunate enough that Coach Entz had spent the past 5 years creating a great locker room inside the linebacking core, that it was very easy to step in and say, guys, I'm not planning on changing anything. I'm going to use all the same terms Coach Entz uses. I already use them anyway. Maybe there's 1 or 2 terms different, but we're going to just keep doing what we're doing. So I hope you guys liked it because it's working. So let's not change. And I think all the linebackers are perfect. Coach, sounds good to us. So great experience, man. What a phenomenal group I got to work with every single day.
With that young coaching staff that Entz hired, a lot of young guys, first chance at coaching at Division I level. Some of them maybe were a reach. When people look at maybe some of the resumes, like, was he ready for that jump to Division I or not? With how hungry those coaches were and how dedicated they were, do you think that helped maybe keep some of the complacency from the players away? Obviously you win that many football games in a row, but you bring in this brand new young coaching staff. I met all these guys, and I was like, this is a special group of coaches. Do you think that kind of affected the players in that way?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that's one of the secrets that not only at this coaching transition, but the same thing with Coach Kleiman. I think that guys are excited. They're competitive dudes. They want to win, and they're hungry to get a win. And no different than a guy like Jackson Hankey saying, yeah, Coach, I know that we won the national championship last year, but I didn't start. I wasn't the guy. I wasn't the one that went and made those plays on that Saturday. I want to be that guy. And no different than me as a coach sitting here saying, I know you guys won a national championship last year, but I didn't do it. I wasn't the linebacker coach. And shoot, I'd sit and say the same thing, not only about myself, but every single one of these guys. So I think that definitely helps. And I think that attitude in the locker room at NDSU, no different than what I had in 2012. I was hungry because, yeah, you go from being the backup, now you get to be the starter. You want to be the guy playing in the national championship game, whatever the case may be, if it's special teams, whatever, but you want to be that guy. And that's one of the areas that I think that in some ways it's almost easier to do it in college than, say, the NFL, because your locker room is constantly changing, but it's constantly staying the same at the same time in terms of your schemes, and you just continue to progress and you get a recruit. So I think that those attributes kind of allow the continued hungriness to happen because you continue to add new starters every single year. Same thing with coaches.
What was the biggest difference between winning a national championship as a player and as a coach?
Well, I think as a coach, you're definitely more nervous because you don't have the control over it. I remember, Coach Standard at times, or guys being all nervous, no different than Coach Bull. Like, I remember Coach Bull one game was all nervous, and I remember going to him like, Coach, like, we're not going against Adrian Peterson and Percy Harvin. And this is back when my Vikes were rocking and rolling with those dudes. But I'm like, Coach, I get it. They're good players, but so are we. Like, trust me, just relax. We're going to go out and get the job done. Don't worry about it. And I think Coach Bull kind of like looking at me like, who is this guy? But so anyway, that's one of the areas I think is kind of more nervous as a coach, because you're sitting there and it's like, man, I'd love to be the one going out and making the checks and communication, but I'm not. So that part, again, I think is just a little bit tougher. But then at the same time, I would also say in some ways it's more rewarding. Man, how much fun it was to see Aaron Mercadal get a start all year long and play 500-some snaps and make, I don't know, tackles. He had 80, 90 tackles. Have a great year after coming off an ACL. Watching a walk-on Jackson Hankey from North Dakota win the Elite 90 award and be a starter all year, play 1,000 reps of football, make a boatload of plays, win his first national championship. I mean, man, that was so much fun just to see and get a part of. So worth it. So in some ways, I'd also tell you, I probably cried harder as a coach after that game, just giving those guys hugs. I was so darn proud of them. So definitely different, but honestly might be more rewarding. And that might sound crazy as a guy that won one as a player, but I really would think there's a lot of validity in that.
You had a chance to coach at the Yeah, you had a chance to coach at the FBS level. Talk about the difference of players from that level down to FCS.
Well, there's definitely a few, talented players that we played against on some other teams that were just outrageously good. And caliber players that maybe we definitely played against some at NDSU. There's no doubt about it. You play a David Johnson who gets drafted in the third round as a running back and has a very, very good NFL career so far. But then maybe we didn't go against guys like that every single week. I know there were certain years we played a lot of fantastic players, but overall, some of the top teams just being a little bit more consistent is definitely something. But at the same time, I would also sit here and say, bowl games was a lot of fun. That was a great experience. But I would also sit here and tell you that, man, there's nothing – I would not trade a national championship experience for a bowl game experience, regardless of level. I would tell you a Division III national championship, an NAIA or junior college is still going to be more fun than a bowl game, just because it's just more stakes on the line. And I understand that a lot of fans may disagree with that, but it doesn't matter what other fans saying. When you're playing at NDSU, the best thing you can do is win a national championship. So that's your goal and that's your dream. And when you get a chance to accomplish it, it means more than finishing 6-6. And playing in a bowl game that takes you to 6-7 and you get some free gear. So that was maybe one thing that I noticed that I just think is a great deal that the NCAA does, obviously, having different levels and having national championships. I think kudos to the NCAA for that setup. But also I will tell you at the same time, I mean, FBS, you get being able to play Washington State or some of those other teams that we were able to play in some of those environments. Man, also a fantastic experience. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I got nothing bad to say about my time at Wyoming. I absolutely loved it.
Right. Week 1 this year, you guys get to go to Oregon, and there's some talk about playing some teams with some different kind of animals on the team. I mean, they got some different athletes. I mean, their defense is absolutely loaded, as well as their offense. Their left tackle, maybe the best player in college football. Talk about the challenges that maybe NDSU was facing in that game.
Well, I think no different than any time we've played any of the other FBS opponents. You're talking about, I think, just depth. I think depth is going to be the main source of some of the differences. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the fact of what the NDSU attitude, at least from what I've seen going into every FBS game, is respecting every single one of those opponents, saying, yeah, I get it. You're good. You're talented. You got great players and great coaches. Well, so do we. We're going to give it our best and see what happens. And to me, that's the best, it's the best attitude to have, of respecting your opponents and then also having confidence in your own abilities. I know that's the attitude we're going to have going into that game. But, at the same time, our players are definitely going to recognize that they're going against the best of the best. That one, the guy that you maybe play once or twice a year as a slot receiver, that's fantastic. I'll go to Kate Johnson, for instance. Well, they've got a couple Kate Johnsons now. So when he's versus when you play South Dakota State, if he's out of the game, okay, maybe you take a breath for a second because you're not going against the best or one of the best wide receivers in the country. Well, at Oregon, you don't get that opportunity just because they've got the depth and the talent. So understanding that is just a different challenge. And I think it just requires a different level of focus and dedication every single play. And do that, you got a shot.
Right. You talked about depth and level of focus and all that stuff. How much did not having spring ball really kind of hurt us? Because if you really look at it, like, I know we talked about it when Hegel was on here, but when we played Kansas State, obviously they had depth. They had, air quote, better players than us and everything like that. But they were the ones tapping out in the fourth quarter. Well, now we lost a lot of that, that ability to kind of be more mentally tough. And how are you guys as a coaching staff handling that right now?
Well, number one, we're putting it on the seniors. There's no doubt about it. And every single time I talk to them, I'm looking at an Aaron Mercadell, a Jackson Hankey, a Bo Poly, a James Kaiser, and I could go down the line. I don't want to mention every single one of them, but I look at all those juniors and seniors and sit here and say, okay, guys, well, you're the leaders of the team. So what are you going to do? You're the one that's having contact with your teammates. You're the ones that eat with them, live with them, run with them. What are you doing to help them grow? How are you going to make these freshmen better? So I think that I firmly believe NDSU is going to be in a great spot compared to the rest of the country because I believe we have fantastic leadership. It's going to be hard for somebody to convince me that their program has better leaders who know how to get the job done than NDSU. And maybe somebody's on par with us, but I know I'm outrageously biased. I get that, but I've also seen the evidence of it. And I've been around okay leaders and I've been around great leaders. And I'm telling anybody firsthand that'll listen, we've got great leaders. So I'm putting it on them to sit here and say, you've got to get these young guys ready. And with my experience at NDSU, when you give players ownership, they run with it and they get the job done every single time. So I've personally got a lot of confidence going in. The one thing that at least is fair is at least everybody in the country is going through the same thing. If it was just NDSU, I might feel bad for us, but we've got to find a way to adapt and overcome. And knowing our leadership and our upperclassmen, I think we're going to be just fine.
Having to adjust and play Oregon with a new quarterback this year, not getting to maybe watch their spring game film either, so not having any idea what their quarterback situation is like. How is that for you guys in the coaching staff? How do you go into game planning when you have that situation when you don't really know what's going to happen for their quarterback?
It's tough. And I think that at least in the first game, you kind of prepare a little bit for everything, no different than we've done at different times, or you're playing a new offensive coordinator. You kind of prepare a little bit for everything. And again, I'm very thankful for NDSU's offense because they give you a wide variety of personnel groupings.
Yes, they do.
You've got an opportunity to at least prepare for things. We talk about it all the time. Like, okay, we might not have to practice 21 personnel all week, and a team shows up on Saturday and does it, and we should be able to call in our day one call, having not practiced it for a month straight. And we've got so many banked reps of it that our guys are going to go out and execute. So that's one of the things that I think I've continued to learn as a coach of, okay, even though you don't know what's happening, if you give your guys a wide variety of plays and you teach them offensive football and you just teach them the game, those banked reps are going to come in. They're somewhere down the road. They're going to pay off for you for some player in some situation. So that's where I think that we're just going to prepare a little bit for everything. And that way our guys are going to be able to, again, just rely on their fundamentals and principles and go out and play fast. And hopefully that'll be the difference for us.
Right. Yeah, the last question that I have, and we've kind of done this to everybody, is, what is, and especially as a player coming back as a coach, it's got to be a different lens for you. What does Bison pride mean to you?
Shoot, that's a great question. To me, for me, Bison pride is the admiration, the love, and the respect that I have for every single one of my teammates. And I say that because, like, when you ask me about guys that I played with, or when somebody asks me about maybe an opportunity, a chance to get to tell a story, there's nothing I love more than when somebody asks me a question about one of my former teammates. Tell me about, you mentioned Colton Hegel or one of you two guys or just anybody. You ask me a question about Billy Turner or Marcus Williams or Ryan Smith down the line. And, man, my eyes are going to light up, and I'm going to just brag on that dude way longer than I should, and somebody's going to get a long-winded answer. And the reason why is because I love every single one of those guys. I know the hard work that they put in. I know their character. I know how much they loved and cared about me, and especially the fact that I know I'm imperfect. And guys being willing to love me and accept me regardless of my faults make me love them just that much more. And it makes me want to run through a wall for them, and anything they ever need, I'm more than willing to do. And it's easier for me to go do that because I know they'd do it for me. So kind of long story short, to me, that's Bison pride. And again, I shoot, if you ever ask me, You can ask me about my wife and my teammates in college, and I'm going to brag about them until you get sick and tired of me. I just am.
That's an awesome answer. It's so true. I mean, when people ask me all the time about Bison Pride or guys on the team, man, you can just go. You can just ramble. You can keep going on and going on. And one last thing I wanted to touch on. Obviously, there's one guy in the offense getting a ton of hype this offseason in Trey, but I want to talk about somebody else, and Dylan Radins. I think this guy has a legit chance to be a first-round draft pick this upcoming draft. How good is Dylan at that left tackle position for NDSU?
You know, that's a great question. Like, I don't watch a lot of the game film, and I don't see a lot of that stuff. I just see him in practice. And my attitude, what I know I've told the linebackers is, like, guys, if you can beat Dylan Radins, if you can get off a block, beat him in a pass rush, you can beat anybody in the country. You know, and trust me, it doesn't happen very often. Like, it's hard. He is phenomenal. Like, if he, like guys, you got to be perfect going against the guy. But if you can do it, shoot, you should have all the confidence in the world. You can literally, I mean, you can beat anybody. So to me, when you're going against somebody that is that good, that's what I think tells me as a coach. I'm like, okay, that guy's the real deal. And I appreciate his work ethic. I appreciate his humility. I'm thankful he's on the team. I'm sure thankful he's on our team. And I know I love the fact that he makes every single one of us better defensively. So we're lucky to have him.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you joining us, Grant. It was great catching up with you, hearing some stories, talking about obviously the big upcoming season. Looking forward to watching you on the field. You know, try not to throw your headset or anything this year. Yell at too many guys. It's always a joy to watch you out there. And hey, your signals they've gotten better. I watch you all the time with your hand signals out there. You're looking good.
I appreciate that. Game one, they weren't very good, but they got better.
always improving.
That's right. No, thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun.